olefin metathesis and its extensions. So these are fascinating reactions because they accomplish some transformations which are otherwise not possible. It's just make and break bonds. One problem with this understanding is that we think of bonds as very real sticks which are there between atoms, which they are not. And so these rearrangements of atoms and bonds can take place fairly easily, although they do not take place at room temperature and so on, in the absence of transition metals. So transition metals seem to be capable of facilitating this rearrangement of atom positions and bonds. And this metathesis, as we shall see today, is even more prevalent than what we normally think or imagine because of our understanding of Lewis' picture of bonds and whatever we've been taught in our bonding theories. So with that brief statement, let me just proceed to so what we discussed in the last class was a bunch of wrong mechanisms by which people thought metathesis reactions proceeded. So these are reactions which people said maybe it goes through 2+2 cycloaddition. So in other words, the intermediate was a cyclobutane, which was somehow interacting with the metal, and this was able to proceed to two alkenes, and these two alkenes can be now obviously, if it's a cyclobutane, it can break in two different ways, and that can give metathesis. And the second one was through metallocyclopentane through an oxidative coupling, and we saw that these are steps which are having precedence. If you remember the diagram that I showed you in the beginning about mechanistic studies, I explained to you that very often we first turn to what is known in the literature, what is available, what kind of pathways can we propose. And oxidative coupling is something that we have encountered in alkyne chemistry, and in Poisson-Kant it was possible with alkenes and alkynes. So it's very natural that we propose a metallocyclopentane. But then it was shown that under the conditions, reaction conditions, metallocyclopentanes do not rearrange the way they have to in order to generate the metathesis products. And then we came to the tetracarbene mechanism, which seems preposterous because you are proposing a metal which is bound to 4 carbenes. And especially if you write carbenes like this, carbene ligands like this, then you think that, this is not a reasonable structure. Of course, it's not going to be planar, but let's imagine, let me write it in a more realistic fashion. So let's assume that there are 4 carbenes like this in a square pyramidal fashion, and now these 4 ligands are in a square, which is very similar to the metallocyclobutane geometry, and this can undergo metathesis. So these are the various possibilities that were discussed, and they were ruled out because of the way in which they did not satisfy the conditions. The known chemistry was not fully explained by these mechanisms. So that's one reason why they got the Nobel Prize, because the Nobel Prize for Chauvin especially was given primarily because he explained the reaction. He did not contribute significantly excuse me, he did not contribute significantly to the development of the reaction, but he explained it in a way that satisfied all the known experiments. And so with that understanding, it was possible to design experiments that would make this reaction very, very useful. And the same thing goes for Grubbs and Schrock. Grubbs and Schrock made sure that there were catalysts which are very useful. Okay, so this was a fundamental, Chauvin's contribution was a fundamental understanding. The mechanism was explained, and Grubbs and Schrock produced catalysts which were extremely useful. So basically, if you look at Chauvin's explanation, he said that it is a non-pairwise exchange. This non-pairwise exchange is something that I had to rush through in the previous class. And I told you that if you went to the Nobel Prize website, you will find that they are explaining it using the American square dance. And since many of us may not have seen this, it may not make a whole lot of sense. But let's take a look at the actual mechanism. I forgot, I did not emphasize a few factors, few points which I would like to emphasize again. So I'm putting back this slide. Basically, what we are saying is that we can start at, this is the resting state of the catalyst. Of course, there are 2 points here. Both are equally valid as resting states. So let's imagine that the one on the bottom is the resting state. You combine it with an alkene. And you form a metallocyclobutane. So this metallocyclobutane is the key intermediate. Which I am putting within black quotes. And this key intermediate can now break in 2 different ways. And if it broke in one way, let's make that very explicit and put different colored arrows. So let me say it broke in this fashion. Then, of course, the reaction is actually going to go in this direction. So these steps which are written here, although we wrote it in a unidirectional fashion, they are completely reversible. And the reason for the reversal is being equally probable is because if you count the number of bonds that are there between carbon and metal, you find that they are exactly equal. So these are thermoneutral reactions, which means that del H for these reactions is very small. Del H is going to be practically negligible. If del H is negligible, the reaction is driven only by entropy. If it's driven by entropy, then it stands to reason that you have both sides of these these equations equally probable, and that is why I said that you can go both ways. So now, if I break it in the blue, let me change the color to blue now, and then I will show you. If these 2 bonds break, that didn't change the color. Then I will have these 2 olefins, and this olefin, the blue colored olefin which I have tick mark, and the carbene. So I can do the same thing with another olefin. This time This time I should put it in a different color, but I have put it in dark blue. So I can have a same type of, the right hand side of the slide is showing you the same part which I showed on the left side. I won't repeat it. Now I can have the formation of ethylene and of course the other possibility is you can have this olefin. So I have the disubstituted olefin and the unsubstituted ethylene on one side and the monosubstituted. This is mono-substituted, this is mono-substituted, and this is the disubstituted olefin. So you can go in a reversible fashion from one to the other. Obviously, this is not the only thing that can be done, because we are exchanging carbenes, not olefins. If you are exchanging olefins with another olefin, then it will be a pairwise exchange. But we are doing a carbene exchange. So that is why we call it a non-pairwise exchange. I hope you understand this. And in this, this is a color-coded version of the same thing that I have shown you in the previous slide, except that now you can see very clearly that you can go from a mono-substituted to a disubstituted or to a differently substituted olefin. There are two codes here. One is R1 and R2. The other is the color. So both the colors, the pink R1 and R2 and the blue R1 and R2. So you can exchange any carbene, blue R1 or pink R1, with the other olefin. So you can see that this is a way in which you can do non-pairwise exchange. So I hope you understand this. If you have any questions at this stage, you can ask me. There are steric factors which will push the reaction from to one side or the other. I will explain a few things to you as we proceed. So are there any questions at this stage? Then I will proceed to the next step.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Susan does. Yes.
Sir, here we only get the trans isomer, or we will get the cis isomer also?
Yeah, that's why I said steric phenomena are going to play a role. You can get both cis and trans depending on the temperature. If you if you have sufficient temperature to interchange you can get both cis and trans. And the trans, of course, will be thermodynamically favored compared to the cis, because that is not going to be a thermoneutral reaction, right? So that breaking of the bond in order to generate the trans one is going to be more favorable than breaking it towards the cis. But the del H will, that small del H will determine the percentage of the two products. Okay, so those are thermodynamic. That's why I said this is going to be a completely reversible system. That's all that we can, that's the only thing that we can emphasize. Thermodynamics will play a role. Yes. So let me briefly, we have been talking generalities, meaning I have not talked about any one catalyst. Okay, now let me talk about the extensive work done by Grubbs and by Schrock. This is not to be minimized, although I don't spend too much time explaining this in class, because this involved a lot of painstaking work. People had to make these complexes, test them. There was no real principle that was involved. There are some few principles, I'll point them out. But other than that, these had to be made experimentally. At that time, even now, theory is not sufficiently advanced for you to predict using, people are trying now AI, artificial intelligence, to figure out whether you can design a better catalyst, etc. But we're still a long way off. Okay, so let me start right here at the very beginning. It was almost in early 80s that it was known in 65 apparently, but it was in 88 that Grubbs found out that simple ruthenium chloride can be a catalyst. And in fact, he showed that RuH2O6 was more efficient and simple than adding this. And the reason for that is because chloride is it's a very sticky ligand. So it's not going to leave the coordination sphere of ruthenium. So RuH2O6 2 plus was a good ligand also. Okay, good catalyst also. Then in 92, they figured out that if you make a bisphosphine dichloride, then the reduced form was in fact a better catalyst. Not only that, this will now dissolve in organic solvents. The ruthenium H2O6 2 plus is in fact an aqueous system. This is an aqueous system. And most of our substrates are organic and they are not soluble in water. So there are water-soluble organics, which it's very useful to do the reaction in water. You can read that in the literature. So in 92, Grubbs figured out that this class of catalysts, which we'll call as a first generation catalyst, I have put it here, this became very popular. It became very popular because one of the factors, one good thing about the Grubbs catalyst is they're not terribly air sensitive or moisture sensitive. And so you could store it in the laboratory. And you can, as I have emphasized in this class, storing in having something available in a bottle is always extremely valuable and helpful in promoting the chemistry. So here is an example that they published in 92. This became the first generation catalyst when this green this green group, I have labeled this as R. If this is pH, then it's available in Aldrich. You can just buy it as the first generation catalyst of Grubbs. In 99, he figured out that if you replace one of the phosphines with a N-heterocyclic carbene. Okay, you replace N-heterocyclic carbene on one side and make this PCY3. This becomes an extremely better catalyst, and we call this the Grubbs second generation catalyst. The advantage of the first generation or the second generation could be the ease of activation, because these are all pre-catalysts now. They have to exchange with the substrate in order to proceed through the catalytic cycle. So all these things made a difference, and the stability, of course, stability. And notice that this probably sticks on right through the reaction. It is only the part that is going to be exchanged that is going to be lost forever. The moment it enters the catalytic cycle, this carbene is exchanged and this carbene stays. Okay, so this is the one that I have tick marked is the one that is going to be exchanged, and the reaction is going to go through multiple cycles. Also, PCY3 also drops off so that the other alkene can come in here. So labile ligand. So these are some principles that they figured out. They figured out that you need to remove the carbene, which is the non-Schrock type, non-Fischer type carbene, that is tick marked in blue. This is a carbene that has to be replaced, and you need to make provision for the alkene to come in, and so one ligand has to be labile. So that's what I have labeled as labile. So one is inert and that stays. And of course, the chloride, like I said, sticks on right through the reaction. So these are some principles they discovered. And Hoveyda, I think Hoveyda was a student of Grubbs. I am not 100% sure, but he has made very significant contributions in asymmetric catalysis. I will discuss it. His name will again come up in my lectures. Hoveyda made another contribution. He said that if this has to be a labile ligand, why don't we make a catalyst which has got a hemi-labile donor? Okay, this now you can see the ether which is present on the carbene. So let's make it in such a way that it will make space readily for the incoming alkene. So in one shot, you make space for the incoming alkene. This is a weak donor. As a weak donor. So you can lose that, bring in the alkene, which you want to do metathesis on, and then the reaction can proceed. So that was the proposal that Hoveyda made, and it also became a commercial catalyst. Now notice that he has put a PCY3. So in fact, the alkene can come in on both sides. So this is this L can be NHC also. That also works. That was also popularized by Hoveyda. And so these are catalysts which have been available commercially. If you look at Schrock started in 1980 with a unimolecular catalyst. The main disadvantage of this catalyst is that it is terribly moisture sensitive. If you don't have a dry box, you can't do these chemistries. And that restricts your the utility that you can have in the laboratory, because dry boxes occupy space. They occupy a large. They utilize a large amount of nitrogen, pure nitrogen, and they are just a mess. Okay, but if you use a Schlenk line very well, you can still manage with Schrock catalysts. But these are catalysts which at least have to be generated in a dry box. These are extremely unstable, high valent. The difference is these are it's not violent. Sorry, that looks like yeah, high valent neodymium catalyst here, and you can also have tungsten. This was developed by Osborne, but notice these are all high valent. Schrock catalysts are high valent, high oxidation state. And this was also developed by another person, Osborne. Osborne also has done a lot of mechanistic studies, and his name might come up again. But he's an older gentleman, no longer active, I think. So here in the Schrock family, they're not called Schrock first generation, second generation, but these are also commercially available. Okay, and to make it more stable, they did two things. One is to put a lot of fluorinated substituents. The fluorine makes the molecule hydrophobic, and if it's hydrophobic, it becomes more soluble. It becomes less sensitive towards oxygen. You can make solid forms of the catalyst, and it becomes more stable towards air and ambient conditions, but they're still moisture sensitive. Because they are high valent, it is stabilized by a nitrene. So you can see that it is stabilized by a nitrene, and the principle is pretty much the same. Because you have low coordination state, you can bring in another alkene without too much difficulty. So this is another advantage with the Schrock catalyst. Very highly substituted olefins can be metathesized. Sterically crowded olefins can undergo metathesis with Schrock catalyst, something that cannot be done by Grubbs catalyst. So they do have some very significant advantages. People won't choose a Schrock catalyst unless they have to. There are some very, because the coordination number is small, high coordination state, low coordination number. Okay, so that makes it possible to carry out metathesis with sterically crowded olefins. So we have, I think I have emphasized this. Commercially available catalysts I have labeled it in green, red, and black. Molybdenum can be there, tungsten can be there, AR can be varied. AR is an aryl group which is on the nitrene ligand and it's labeled in green. So that can be varied. The CF3 groups can be varied. You can also combine the two R groups and make it chiral. I will show you an example in a minute. Here is the example of a chiral ligand. So the chiral ligand can be useful if I have a substrate which is capable of forming a chiral product. Okay, it doesn't have to be chiral to start with, but if I have a chiral ligand, it's just like you shake only when the right hand and right hand shake hands together. So if there is a prochiral substrate, then you can form only one product, one chiral product, and the other product will not be formed or formed to a lower extent. And so this is a chiral catalyst, which is unique to Schrock. So Schrock catalysts have advantages and disadvantages, excuse me. And the important thing is the difficulty of stabilizing it and so on and so forth. Okay. So that's all I want to talk about catalyst design, because the examples are numerous. People still keep developing metathesis catalysts because of the difficulty. One important point that I have not emphasized so far is that the moment you generate the catalytically active species in solution, you lose the carbene that was originally there on the Schrock catalyst or the Grubbs catalyst. So you can start with a Fischer carbene or a Schrock carbene, and you can still do the reaction. There's no problem. Why? Because after the first cycle, the carbenes are going to be coming only from the substrate. Substrate is there in a large amount, so you use about 5% or 1% of the catalyst. So the carbene that is going to be present in the resting state of the catalyst is going to be the one that is coming from the alkene. So any one of these carbenes, let me emphasize that in the, so any one of them, any one of these carbenes is going to sit on the metal, on the active site of the metal. So it doesn't matter which carbene you take, Schrock carbene or Fischer carbene. You can use any one of them. Both of them catalyze the same reactions. One more advantage with Schrock carbenes is the fact that they tolerate oxophilic groups. Okay, so on the picture you can see on the slide here, you can see that I have, okay, to explain this slide, I need to say that this is a kind of a hand waving explanation. You know, the Schrock catalyst has got oxo groups already there. So it's not going to be sensitive towards aldehydes and ketones, etc. Not going to be very reactive. So they can tolerate them. And olefins will still undergo metathesis. Whereas if you take the Grubbs catalyst, olefins undergo metathesis, but aldehydes, ketones, esters, and amides can slow down the reaction. And sometimes they can even stop the reaction. If they very strongly bind your catalyst, then they can stop the reaction. So this is a problem with Grubbs catalyst. They can be deactivated with oxo groups, which are very good ligands. Whereas metathesis can still work with aldehydes, ketones, with these are Schropp catalysts. Okay, so that is something that people have illustrated. I've taken this from a paper, but there are sufficient number of reviews on metathesis which will give you this information. Application of metathesis, because of what I just emphasized to you a little while ago, you know, the reaction is thermoneutral, so you can go from one direction to the other direction without any difficulty. How do you push the reactant completely to the product? This is a trick. In the case of petrochemicals, where Phillips company, for example, utilized it, Arco Petroleum Company utilized it very effectively. They did metathesis, and then they will boil one substrate, one product out. The useful product would be utilized by a separation method. So you generate a mixture of products and then separate what you want. And it was not very difficult. In the lab, that's not going to be a very feasible solution, because every time the yield is going to be 50%, 60%, and so on and so forth. So that's not going to be useful. I have borrowed this from this gentleman, Young Kwon Kim. He must have been a student in Harvard. He has given a lecture which was very good. I borrowed some material from there. Right now, he is working in Samsung, but he doesn't do organometallic chemistry anymore. At least it looks like that. So we can, by suitable engineering of the reaction, by which I'm not talking about chemical engineering, but just clever manipulation of the reaction conditions, we can push the reaction to one side. So there are varieties of reactions, metathesis variants, which we will talk about. One is ring closing metathesis. If I position the two double bonds in such a way that I'll form a 5-membered ring or a 6-membered ring, I will push the reaction to the 5-membered ring side or the 6-membered ring side. There are not many examples where people have pitted 5 against 6, but 5 against 10 or 5 against 7 is a clear winner. 5 wins always. Okay. Similarly, 6 is also extremely good. On the other hand, if I have a very strained ring, I can do ring opening metathesis. Okay, I can do ring opening metathesis. Surprisingly, Grubbs was the one who wanted to make polyacetylene. Polyacetylene, I have written it out here, is extremely attractive because this is now a polymer film. And why are we interested? Because if you dope it with a cationic oxidant or a reductant, with an oxidant or a reductant, you can push the, you can make a polymer which will be able to conduct electricity. So this can be a conducting polymer film. This is very attractive. I won't be surprised if people are still trying to make not necessarily polyacetylene, but any flexible film, because conducting flexible film is very useful for electronics. I'm sure some of these foldable phones that have come up are using some kind of a flexible electronics that you can think of. So Grubbs was working on that, but his first try was to make polyacetylene. Unfortunately, molecular weights were low, and so I think he has given it up after the 90s. I cannot be sure, but I think he has given it up. So ring opening can also be done with 4-membered rings, 3-membered rings, and 8-membered rings. So 5, 6, and 7 would do ring closing. That seems to be the case. The others can ring open. And you can do polymerization, and that's what I told you. Ring opening metathesis polymerization can also be done, and that was what Grubbs was doing. And you can do acyclic. You don't have to stop with start with the ring always. You can take any diene and do metathesis reaction. Okay, so we'll take a look at some of these. The best way to write it is to write it in a generic form. You will notice that if n equals 0, this will form a pentene, right? No, n equals 1. N equals 1 will form a pentene, and the way in which it is written, and you will liberate ethylene. You can remove ethylene from the reaction medium because it's a gas. So this is a very easy way by which you can promote ring closing metathesis. Just remove the ethylene by allowing it to go away, or open vessel, or even a closed vessel, but you can distill it out. And the other point to note is that if I have a lower concentration, I can permit polymerization reactions. The chances of 2 of these species meeting with each other, the green arrow is promoted by high concentration. High concentration, if I have 2 of these species will come together, and they will obviously form a polymer. Okay, and if I use high temperature, if I use a very active catalyst, I can avoid the temperature, high temperatures. Most of these reactions work at 80 degrees or 100 degrees, so you can control them fairly easily. You remember when we started this lecture, I told you about metathesis being carried out at 700 degrees with petroleum companies were doing that. Okay, at that time, no homogeneous counterparts were known. They could do work only with high temperatures. And if you avoid high temperatures, then also you can push the reaction to one side. If I have high temperature, then the ring closing metathesis is favored. So surprisingly, this has been used for large rings also by working with low concentration. So you can work at low dilution, high dilution conditions, and that high dilution will promote ring closing metathesis. So let us go through this whole example using Grubbs' first generation catalyst, let's say, and let us take a look at what we are, the steps that we are going through. I told you that we need to have one of the ligands falling off. So in this particular case, they have this is written in such a way that you are having an associative mechanism. So you can have an associative step, but you can also have PCY3 fall off first. You can have this falling off first, but the active intermediate has to be a species where the carbene plus olefin are on the same metal. Now, if the carbene and olefin are in the same metal, are both close to each other, you can form a bond by, let me make this fairly bold. So let's use a red color. No, that wasn't. So it forms a bond between these two species. So you have a metallocyclobutane as an intermediate. This metallocyclobutane now breaks in such a way that, let's use the red color. Then I have the forward arrow, and now I have formed a new carbene and the ethylene. This ethylene can be removed because it's a gas, removed as a gas, and then you can, this R group, this whole R group is something that we have put it in as, let's use yet another color. You might as well capitalize on that. This whole thing is R. Okay, so now we put back the R here, and then we get this intermediate. This intermediate now again has only, in the ring closing metathesis, it only has got the substrate. So this has got the substrate minus CH2. Substrate minus CH2 coordinated to the ruthenium complex, and this can now go ahead and form the methylene coordinated Grubbs catalyst with the product interacting with the catalyst. So now you can push off the catalyst from the coordination sphere using PCY3. You don't have to use PCY3. You can go directly onto the next step. Actually, in the second cycle, the catalyst can go directly onto the in fact, I should not put it here. I should put it here. I can go directly here. Why add and subtract PCY3? I can go directly here. So the catalytic cycle becomes very simple the moment I go through the first cycle. Okay. So this was a contribution from Grubbs lab. And as I told you, as one of you asked, the substituents do make a difference. You will not always get 100% product, but because ethylene is a gas which can be removed from the reaction vessel fairly easily, ring closing metathesis is extremely easy to do. You can do it with a variety of catalysts, but in this picture, what I have shown you is that if you want to do some complicated substrates, you have to go back to Schrock. Schrock catalysts seem to be resisting oxygen. So this is the oxygen which is going to be a nuisance, and it's going to coordinate to Grubbs catalyst and slow down the reaction, if not stop it altogether. So it is you can see very clearly that Schrock catalysts have a distinct advantage over the Grubbs catalysts. Okay, so this is a comparison which I have taken from a paper which clearly shows that the substituent can make a difference. Okay, the substituent can make a difference in the product distributions and in the catalyst choice. Okay. The second thing is Le Chatelier's principle. Le Chatelier's principle is convenient to push the reaction to one side. You can use an excess of one of the reagents. Just as we removed ethylene by Le Chatelier's principle, we push the reaction to one side. Same thing can be done on the substrate side. Here, they've used an excess of these allylic acetates. This substrate has been used, not too much of an excess, but two equivalent excess compared to the other substrate, and that gives you nearly 80%. 80%, and notice the ratio. Cis to trans is 3:1. Okay, so that is it could also, there could also be some amount of effect due to the coordination of acetate, but in this case E by Z is 3:1. So thermodynamically this is you don't expect the E product in a higher quantity, but that's what you've got. Okay, but you do get a mixture. Okay, any in many of these acetate coordination, you seem to be getting E greater than Z. And I think it is because of the coordination of the acetate, which leads to the final product selectivity being in pushed towards E, the cis form. So here again, they've used a higher amount of one substrate to push the reactant towards one side. And you can see that typically you can push it all the way to 90%, 80% to 90%. The remaining amount is other olefins. So a mixture of compounds are formed. So what we have discussed today is the fact that you can do push the reaction to one side. If you want to do polymerization, you use an excess of one of the substrate and use the substrate in high concentration, and then you push it towards the polymer. If you want to do a ring closing and you want to remove ethylene, then you can use Le Chatelier's principle. Similarly, if you want to just do acyclic diene metathesis, you use a huge excess of this green substrate, and then you can push it to one side. Okay, not use huge excess, two equivalents, and then you can push it to one side. So these are kind of tricks that are used, but the same substrate, notice how it can give you a variety of products. So you have to be careful when you do the reaction, both in terms of choice of the catalyst and also in terms of choice of the reaction conditions, so that you push the reaction to one side. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of metathesis. With this, I will tell you just one slide about steric effects. Grubbs, this is Grubbs catalyst, especially true of Grubbs catalyst. If you have a heavily substituted olefin, you have no reaction. If you have less and less substituted olefins, you have higher reaction. So what is the moral of the story? Moral of the story is that Grubbs has limited value. Grubbs catalysts have limited value. But remember, Grubbs value is the first choice because they are readily accessible in the lab. Okay, but this is typical because if you want to coordinate your olefin, the first step, coordinate your olefin to the catalyst, this is not even going to coordinate. So how is it going to react? That is the reason why you have this relative reactivity. Okay, so remember that your olefin has to coordinate first. In order to form the catalytically active intermediate, you need to first coordinate the olefin, and that preference is shown here. Now, let me make a final comment about this reactive catalytic cycle that we put. This is the essential cycle. This is the initiator part, and this is the essential cycle that where we are going round and round with these two substrates. What have we done? Basically, we start with a catalyst which, let's say, in a zero oxidation state, and we coordinate an olefin and do an oxidative coupling. This intermediate, which I have, this is the species which has undergone oxidative coupling. So N+2 oxidation state, if M has got a oxidation state of N, then this intermediate has got a N+2 oxidation state. And this is shuttling between the N and N+2 formal oxidation states fairly readily. That's all. And that's what we are doing in terms of this reaction is concerned. If you notice the intermediate, I see that there is a saturated ring system which is present here. If I now make it unsaturated, let me just for the sake of, suppose I start with an alkyne, okay? Suppose I start with an alkyne and I have an carbine as a metal. Everywhere I will have one extra bond. Okay, I am now going to have this. I'm just adding a double bond. Okay, and now this is a metallocyclobutadiene. I can write it in a different form by just changing the position of the double bond. I should remove this R group if I put a double, right? I can't have two groups. So I have this. So now, because you can have this type of an interchange, I can break it in a different fashion. So this tells you that maybe alkyne metathesis is possible. In fact, alkyne metathesis is possible. What I'm going to do is to show you I'm going to show you alkyne metathesis again from a presentation which is available on the internet. This link will be available for you on the. This is the link. If you click on it, you will get this. You will be able to see this, right? So maybe what I should do is to open it up from the, yeah, now this will be clearer for you. What we just told you in the previous slide is exactly what is written here on this slide here. Alkyne metathesis can be done with a carbine and an acetylene. I can go through exactly the same process. Only thing is, remember, you're now going to interchange the position of the double bonds in the metallocyclobutadiene. So that's just tautomerism. So you're not going to lose any energy doing that. And the best catalyst was found to be this catalyst, which is highlighted here for you on the slide. This is a tungsten catalyst with, this is a Schrock alkylidene catalyst. Okay, and of course, it was done by Schrock. The first example was done by Schrock. Schrock alkylidenes are many. He has developed it from 1981 onwards. These were rational catalysts as opposed to the so-called MOR2. This is French, so it should be pronounced as MOTRO systems, where they just refluxed MoCO6 and arene and generated some catalytically active intermediate. This is still a black box. This is an extremely rational way of doing the alkyne metathesis. Okay, and the alkyne metathesis concentrate on the portion which is there in the lower half of the slide. Notice how you can take these two alkynes and generate two new alkynes with this tungsten catalyst, and this equilibrium is reached in 5 minutes at ambient temperature. That's an amazing reaction, nothing short of magic. If you think of bonds as sticks and atoms as balls, your ball and stick model will prevent you from thinking like this. But that's exactly what has happened. I will skip this slide. I'll just show you. I will show you an alkyne metathesis which has been utilized to make total synthesis of a molecule which is of some value, some biological evaluation. So this was done using this tungsten catalyst. Okay, so it's very difficult to imagine making this ring system if you did not have the access to this type of ring closing metathesis of alkynes. So I'm going to stop sharing this presentation. Let me just stop sharing this presentation, and I will invite questions at this point. Yeah. I have to share 2 more slides, but I will share it. I will share it later. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Yeah, so in one slide you talked about that E by Z ratio, and you said E is not thermodynamically expected. Why is that?
No, they look at the ratio 3:1.
Yes, sir. So E is the trans product.
Yeah. So Z is the cis. I am saying that there could be if you just take thermodynamic ratios, it's probably more towards E than what is found.
Yeah, thermodynamically we expect the trans one, isn't it?
Yeah, trans one, but much more than what is formed. That is surprising that it is not so much. That is, yeah. I think I did not explain that very clearly. See, there is one complication. If you go back to the intermediates that are present, the oxygen substituent can weakly coordinate to the ruthenium. And if you remember the Hoveyda's contribution was the presence of ether in the catalyst site itself, so that it can weakly coordinate. So that kind of weakly coordination, if it has to be present, then that will bias one of the products. Yeah.
So another thing, in the first half of the lecture, maybe there was a slide where 3 of the catalysts were shown, and below there were like olefins and aldehydes and ketones that were shown.
Yeah.
So can you go to that slide? Like reactivity and which catalyst show, like favor which of the things?
Yeah, I'm trying to show that. Yes. Yeah, this I took
Here,
from review. Yes. What I wanted to point out was that unless you have pure olefins, grubs, first generation, second generation catalysts seem to get deactivated, or they do not go through metathesis. Whereas if I have aldehydes and ketones, I can still go through metathesis when it comes to shock. Actual examples I have not taken in this.
actually, in the right down corner, the reactive and the arrow goes up. So it seems like olefin is the more reactive towards Grubbs catalyst, and the aldehydes and ketones are less reactive, so they won't affect.
Reactive towards metathesis.
Yes, sir. So for ruthenium catalyst,
okay, I'll tell you, aldehydes and ketones, they don't undergo metathesis. The reaction stops. Okay. So olefins undergo metathesis.
Okay, sir. Then
okay, you
it's
understand
clear.
the
Thank you.
difference.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I don't have in these lectures, I don't get time to tell you aldehydes are substrates which can be forced to undergo metathesis. Okay. You take an aldehyde and you can go through metathesis. This has been done fairly recently in 2016 or 17 using iron trichloride as a catalyst. And I will give you this reference, but we really don't have time. So I'm not showing you those slides, but I have the paper on my desk, on my list here. Let me see if I can pick it up. It's possible to do, yeah, here is the, I'm not able to expand it. 1 second. Here is the, okay. So this is published. This is published fairly recently. It's in 2019. Last year it was published. Okay. So this is a big news. Why? Because you are forcing olefin to undergo metathesis. Okay. I will post this for you. So
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So now you understand the difference between the two.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's clear.
It's reactive towards metathesis. Any other question?
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, you have said that in the alkene metathesis, the formation of metallocyclobutane is an oxidative coupling reaction. But is there any oxidation change of oxidation state in the metal? I didn't understand it. As far as I can see, the metal oxidation state is remaining the same.
Why?
Because when it's in a carbene, the oxidation state of the carbon basically acts as a -2, right? C -2, and when the cyclobutane forms, metallocyclobutane, one of the carbons gets -1 and the other gets -1. So it's basically acting as a shuttle between the electrons. That's what I think.
Yeah, I don't want to argue this too much, but carbenes are considered as neutral ligands, even in the ionic method. Okay.
All right.
Even in the ionic method, we don't talk about this carbene, for example. This is not taken as 2-.
Yes.
This is considered neutral. When it comes to nitrogen, people consider it as 2-. So that's why I said I don't want to debate this too much. Oxidation state itself is just our electron counting. So generally, people call that oxidative coupling. But
Okay.
there is, as far as molecules are concerned, they are not counting electrons. It's only we human beings are counting electrons.
Okay.
Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll stop the recording and